Having a child is a blessing, a new thread in life. Hope and happiness blend on this canvas. Unfortunately, some souls are unworthy of this divine gift. South Korea, known for its dynamism, was shaken by a story that shattered compassion and left an indelible mark on the collective conscience. This story is a heartbreaking journey cloaked in darkness. A 15-month-old angel died in a cruel twist of fate while her parents hid the truth from society. This tragic episode was a seismic event that shook a nation, prompting reflections on the fundamentals of parenthood, the duty to protect children, and the need to rethink systems that protect the most vulnerable. Let's explore the terrifying kimchi container child abandonment. In crisp October 2022, the Ministry of Health and Welfare meticulously pieced together the shocking details of this case. It was part of the Noble E-Child Happiness Support Project, which identified vulnerable children under 18 who had not received essential vaccinations and preventive shots. The youngest innocents, under 3 years old, were dangerously hidden from scrutiny due to a survey design flaw. It was a stark reminder that bureaucracy can mask the most vulnerable's cries. In this bureaucratic maze, a vigilant Pone public servant noticed a curious omission. A delicate and weighty name demanded attention. Truon, a resident child, was a phantom in official records because he never had infant health checks or kindergarten registrations. This unusual absence caused unease and inquiries. Mrs. A's physical presence and cryptic responses remained a mystery. This disconcerting inconsistency prompted a police report on October 27, 2022. The police's initial goal was to confirm Truon's survival. They requested a photo of an uncertain world. Mrs. A agreed, but with a shady photo. The child in the photo was not Truon, but a different soul, an unrelated child of a different age. Truon, born October 12, 2018, would have been 4 years old, but the child before them appeared to be 2. In her deception, Mrs. 8 broke the truth mirror. Unsettling revelations emerged as the case unfolded and was scrutinized by the public. Mrs. 8 made a strange request on the carrot market online. She wanted a 4-year-old girl, a pawn in a deception game, to pose as her own. The truth was stranger than fiction, and this revelation chillingly revealed her story. Mrs. 8 revealed the scandalous details under questioning. Financial hardship drove her to abandon Truon. She appeared detached from her fragile life when the police visited the site of her alleged abandonment, as if it were a story from another world. Police suspicion grew as the investigation progressed. Their investigation revealed a disturbing lack of reports or witnesses in an area that should have been frequented. They had a strong feeling that something was wrong, which changed their investigation. It was no longer a curiosity, it was a criminal case requiring all resources. Each revelation deepened this tragedy's mystery. Chuan's father, Mr. Trey, was caught in a web. At 29, he was 5 years younger than Mrs. H. Their turbulent love story led to their separation and divorce. Their estrangement added to the case's mystery. Mrs. A's testimony was inconsistent, and her demeanor alternated between calm and naive. The police struggled to get a confession. Mrs. Hall, a tech resident, planned a strange event. After Chuan's death, she changed her daughter's registered address to Pan, where relatives live. She initially denied the allegations, claiming abandonment and loss. The introduction of a profiler and digital forensic evidence changed the story. Mrs. H reluctantly confessed during her intense police interrogation. She had a boyfriend at the time of the incident, adding eerie detail. She faithfully visited her ex-husband, Mr. Trey, in prison over 70 times, which was strange and unsettling. However, she never appeared with their children. What's more surprising is that Mr. Trey, in prison for fraud, was unaware of the tragedy. Mrs. H told him their child had died and asked him to help dispose of the body. In an odd twist of fate, he didn't investigate the child's death and instead helped hide the dark secret. In a carrier bag, their 2-year-old daughter died in their tech home. The remains were then secretly moved to her relative's Pan home and given to her father, Mr. Tre, after his release from prison. Mr. Tre, a central figure in this chilling drama, buried his daughter in a kimchi container. He hid Chuan's fragile form in a container while driving a delivery truck to saunas and internet cafes. Even during his respite, he held this eerie cargo as he slept. On November 14, 3 years after Chuan's tragic death, her corpse was found. She was unrecognizable under layers of wrapping paper and plastic. Investigators were devastated by the grim discovery, a haunting reminder of human cruelty. After several grim translocations by her parents, Chuan's remains were reburied. Mrs. H and Mr. Tre were arrested on a variety of charges after the secrecy was broken. Mrs. H was charged with violating the Child Welfare Act and hiding a body, as was Mr. Tre, who had stored his daughter in a kimchi container. The revelation that Mr. Tre carried his daughter's body in kimchi for 2 years is incomprehensible. It depicts a father's descent into madness as he, a delivery driver, carried a shopping bag with Chuan's lifeless body in it. Even during mundane tasks, he held onto the kimchi container, a macabre act with unfathomable consequences. During this complicated investigation, Mr. Tre shed tears as he revealed a heartbreaking truth. He claimed to have slept clutching his daughter's lifeless body, possibly out of remorse or to elicit leniency in his sentence. His tears show the complex emotions beneath this gruesome tale. However, Mrs. H cried for another reason. She felt wronged, tangled in guilt and self-justification. She admitted to leaving her child unfed at home, but she strongly denied murder. She said she returned home one morning to find her child dead, paralyzed by fear, so she decided to lie. Mrs. H admitted to one grievous act, begging her husband to dispose of the body. Mrs. H had mentioned a fever and vomiting in the days before her daughter's death, but she didn't seek medical attention. Neglect caused red spots on the child's body while she was alive. These weren't just blemishes, they could indicate a life of poor hygiene and prolonged neglect, which could lead to skin diseases. The child was alarmingly underweight, indicating a long struggle with nutrition. The haunting portrait of neglect and abuse suggested a cycle of maltreatment beyond inattention. Mr. Tre and Mrs. H had another child, a shocking revelation. 4 years before Chuan's tragic death in 2020, their second child, born in December 2015, died mysteriously after 100 days. X-rays from the child's emergency room visit in cardiac arrest revealed a terrifying truth about this chapter of their lives. The child had a large skull fracture and healed rib and arm fractures. The couple initially blamed their first child's accidental actions for the chest and arm injuries and the skull fracture on a bed fall. However, experts who carefully examined the X-rays were unanimous. They considered the injuries murder committed with unnecessary malice. Children's bones are elastic, making fractures rare, they said. The force needed to fracture a rib is like kicking a soccer ball. Without adult help, twisting and torquing a child's arm is nearly impossible. Even though there was clear evidence of abuse, the police station investigating the case concluded that the second child, only 100 days old, died from a simple accident. This shocking discovery raises disturbing and heartbreaking questions about whether Chuan, their third child, was abused in similar ways that went unnoticed. This haunting and disturbing investigation left the truth shrouded in a labyrinth of pain and deception. Chuan's autopsy was difficult because her body had deteriorated so much that determining the cause of death and pre-existing injuries was impossible. Airway obstruction and hypoglycemia were suspected, but neglect and abuse loomed. The autopsy revealed a skull hole, a chilling clue. Like a macabre puzzle piece, this discovery suggested mummification, where skull damage caused a hole in the back of the head. Such horrors cast doubt on the couple's motives. Did they commit a series of cold-blooded murders, meticulously covered up, while shamelessly collecting child support allowances? Mrs. Sutter may have used Chuan as a pawn in a sinister financial aid game, which sends chills down the spine. Mrs. Su's enigmatic persona, revealed during a broadcast investigation, increased unease. Deception was her specialty since school, and she had a criminal record. She disguised herself as a police officer after graduating from the academy. Only that her father was a police officer was known to her classmates, seniors, and juniors. This was also a lie. Her father worked in transportation. With previous fraud revealed, the web of lies thickened. Such lies persisted throughout the trial. In May 2023, the prosecution sought a 13-year prison sentence for Mrs. Su and a 5-year sentence for Mr. CH. The severity of the crimes prompted public outrage that the sentences were too lenient. On June 15, 2023, the first trial at Uto District Court ended with mixed justice. 5 years for child abuse leading to death, 2 years for concealing the body, and 6 months for violating the Social Security Benefit Act got Mrs. Su 7 years and 6 months in prison. She had to complete 80 hours of child abuse treatment and was barred from working at child-related institutions for 5 years. Court's reasoning for Mrs. Su's sentence was clear. As the victim's caregiver, she failed to provide health checks and vaccinations. Despite obvious health issues, she left the child for long periods, causing her death. The court noted the heinous method used to conceal the body, which showed the crime's vileness and left little room for remorse. The body's concealment earned Mr. Tre 2 years and 4 months in prison. Given the court's recognition of their flaws, the sentence is disappointed. Mrs. Ha immediately appealed, denying child abuse leading to death and accusing the sentence of injustice. The prosecution is also considering an appeal, leaving this tale of horror and deception unfinished as justice struggles with truth and remorse. Chuan, a child abandoned until the end, was a horrible tale of abandonment and neglect. With both parents detained, no one could give her a proper farewell and usher her into memory. Even the siblings of both parents, struggling financially, declined the solemn responsibility. On January 20, compassion and humanity broke through the darkness. In Chuan's absence, the Korea Child Abuse Prevention Association honored her. Her remains condition reflected her tragic journey, and dressing her for the final journey was difficult. The hospital staff bought pink clothes and gently dressed her for the touching ceremony. Chuan finally found rest and solace after spending more days in a kimchi container than in her 15-month life. She was buried in a peaceful forest in Cheonan Province, where the sun and breeze could finally reach her. A life of solitary tears and rare smiles plagued her. Despite her story's tragedy, the hope that she is free from pain and isolation in a realm beyond offers solace. This heartbreaking story shows the extent of human cruelty and the need to protect the most vulnerable. Chuan's story will forever remind us of the urgency of protecting children and instilling compassion.